All right, today we're going to tear apart a really controversial playbook on modern dating. It's written from a man's perspective, and it claims to have all the secrets to a lasting relationship. But let's just say the advice is pretty unconventional. We're going to break down its core arguments and really look at them through a critical, sociological lens.
Right out of the gate, the author's whole philosophy hangs on this one really stark idea. It's this polarizing framework that basically splits all women into two camps based on how they serve a man's life. And this isn't just some throwaway line. It's the foundation for literally everything else in the book.
So you have to wonder, right? What's the logic here? What's the thinking behind such a provocative worldview? That's the big question we're going to unpack piece by piece.
Okay, first, let's get into the author's motive. He basically argues that he's giving a voice to a perspective that's been totally silenced in all the modern talk about dating.
So here's his core premise. He's saying that for the last, 50 years or so, the entire cultural conversation about dating has been completely one-sided. He thinks that by focusing only on what women want, we've just ignored what men actually need to commit. And that's led to this huge communication breakdown. He positions his book as, the long overdue fix.
And this whole premise leads us straight to the absolute cornerstone of his philosophy, a concept he made up called intrinsic value. And let me tell you, this is, without a doubt, the most controversial part of the entire playbook.
So what on earth is intrinsic value? Well, according to the author, it's got nothing to do with a woman's career or her personality or anything she's accomplished. Nope, it's his personal term for how a man measures a woman's loyalty. And he says it's determined almost entirely by one thing, her sexual history.
The author builds this whole logic in 3 clean steps. First, he claims a woman forms this unique, kind of permanent bond with her very first sexual partner. Step 2, because of that, only a virgin can offer her husband complete, undivided loyalty. And third, any guy after that first one only gets a diminished piece of that loyalty. He even makes up a fictional character, Linda, to be this big cautionary tale about a woman who ruins her chances at marriage. Now, if you look at this from a sociological point of view, this whole concept is built on a few really key biases. The first one is something called biological essentialism, this flawed idea that men and women have these fixed, hardwired brains. The second is a super obvious sexual double standard, where a woman's past is judged way differently than a man's. And maybe most importantly, it just completely ignores how culture, not biology, is what shapes our ideas about love, loyalty, and what commitment even means. So this idea of value then directly feeds into the author's views on power in a relationship. He argues that the gender roles he's laying out aren't just a preference. They're actually a biological necessity for things to work. He lays out a really clear hierarchy here. He claims it's all pure instinct. Men are driven to lead women they see as, inferior, while women are hardwired to want men they see as superior. He presents this whole thing not as a cultural idea, but as just an unchangeable biological fact that's absolutely essential for attraction. So, what does that actually look like in practice for women? The advice he gives is super specific. Avoid confrontation, always back up the man's lead, and if you happen to disagree, you should use what he calls the feminine art of persuasion instead of, actually taking charge. This isn't exactly new advice. It pretty much mirrors very traditional, patriarchal relationship structures. Okay, so if that's the power dynamic, how does he tell women to keep a guy attracted long-term? Well, this is where the strategy kind of shifts from being a sprint to a full-on marathon. And this quote pretty much captures his philosophy perfectly. He's arguing that the work never, ever stops. To keep a man's interest, you need constant, strategic effort, and your main tool is just being unpredictable. The goal is to always keep him guessing. And the core of this whole strategy is this really stark duality. He advises a woman to be all reserved and proper in public, but then be completely uninhibited and adventurous in private. The logic underneath it all is pretty simple. If a man is totally satisfied at home, he won't have any reason to go looking for it somewhere else. To kind of manage women's expectations, he uses this really vivid husband shopping center analogy. He pictures women on an escalator, passing up good men on every floor because they're hoping for someone even better on the next level. The warning is, of course, that they'll eventually get to the top floor, find it empty, and realize they passed on perfectly good partners in their hunt for perfection. And he really drives this point home with a huge contrast. He claims men's needs in a life partner are simple, just 4 basic things. Women's desires, though, he paints them as this gigantic, contradictory laundry list of demands.
The implication is pretty clear. Women's expectations are so out of whack that they're basically the architects of their own disappointment.
So, after all this advice, what's the final word? According to the author, it all boils down to the consequences of a woman's choices, especially the choices she makes when she's young.
The author's conclusion is just blunt. He argues that by the time a woman decides she's ready to settle down and get married, she might have already spent her one and only valuable asset, that intrinsic value. In his worldview, her ability to give total loyalty is just gone.
And that's the choice the author leaves women with. His entire playbook funnels down to this one single provocative ultimatum. A woman's life isn't this rich spectrum of experiences, it's a binary choice between two paths that can't coexist. You can have fun, or you can get married.
But, maybe the author is asking the wrong question altogether. Maybe the real question isn't about which path a woman should choose. It's about the cultural impact of this kind of advice. How does a playbook built on biological essentialism and these really rigid gender roles affect everyone trying to figure out modern dating? How does it shape our expectations for ourselves and for each other? Now that's the conversation that's really worth having.